So I guess we're going to be talking about flowing and how to best do that. So I'm going to try and make this short and sweet because I do think that there's only so much that at the end of the day you can probably say about this topic, and also because I think that this workshop should probably be short and sweet and also full of things that you can already apply at WUDC. I think also by the stage at which most people are already, attending WUDC, your tracking is already good enough to, be able to follow a debate. You probably already have a style that you prefer. So it's more about refining and perfecting what you're already doing rather than attempting to, test a completely brand way of tracking literally the day of the World University Debating Championship. Cool. So then the things that I'm going to mostly be talking about is just really quickly going through the main ways that most people use to flow when judging and when speaking. And then after that, I'm just going to go through what I actually think is the most useful part, which is tips that I use or that other people that I know use to improve their flowing and to keep track of what is being said in the round, basically. Okay, so firstly, in the division of flowing when you're speaking and judging, also just for the record, I say flowing, but what I mean is like tracking. I just use that word because I started out with it, so old habits die hard, I guess. But yeah, anyway, tracking. I think that there's a very fundamental difference of tracking when you're speaking and tracking when you're judging. I think the bits that are relevant to you as a speaker are considerably less than the bits that are relevant to you as a judge. So I think that when you are a judge, you should actually be trying to note down all of the things that happen in the debate because it's quite unclear what is and is not going to become relevant by the end of it. And because I think that you should still be able to reference things that even if they weren't relevant in the debate. First of all, because if speakers ask you for feedback, you still need to be able to be like, this bit was not relevant. I don't think this should have been included as part of that feedback. But also secondly, it's also because, all bits of the debate can actually become relevant later in deliberation. I don't think the same is true when you're speaking. I don't think that everything that comes out of the PM's mouth is necessarily going to be important for you as a closing opposition team. In fact, most of it is not going to be. You don't have time to respond to absolutely everything. So I think it's also to an extent kind of a waste of time to attempt to write literally everything down, given that you also have to juggle a myriad of other things that you're also doing, such as writing your own speech and listening to their responses and trying to communicate with your partner regarding what the extension is. So given that time limitation, I think it's a bit difficult to try and keep track of everything. So I guess then I'll just quickly talk about the main ways of tracking. And that basically just depends on if you're old school or if you enjoy tracking with computers. I personally really like tracking with paper still because I'm old and I'm old school and I like paper notes. So if you do that, most people tend to use several different sheets. And by that, it's just sort of utilizing sort of one sheet on one side, right? Like Prime Minister, leader of opposition, Deputy Prime Minister, leader of op, or if your handwriting is very big, just like go down like that. There's some people also that prefer to do like the team on the same page. I actually think that works better for me if I was doing that style, simply because that way you can see all the contributions of one team in one particular sheet rather than attempt to like juggle it around that people ask you during deliberation. Other alternatives that people also utilize are, and this is the one that I do, I just flow everything on one single sheet with tiny handwriting, and you can do it in columns. I think that the advantage of this is that you can see sort of the full debate all at once, and you can also make lines and drawings. Alternative, use two sheets and just do like 4 columns across the sheet for top half and then bottom half. I think that also makes it easier to visualize. Long story short, it is basically just a column and then like a little line, I guess, of things that teams have said. In terms of tracking as a judge, when you're using a computer, I think that the easiest thing is just to have a more, not like a existing modified Word document, because I think that if you don't actively try and find a format that works for you, it sometimes makes it a bit hard to track, because it always ends up just being like a Word document that goes down, 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 down. So people that have been more successful with tracking on the online era, I think, either have made a document format that works for them, particularly when they're judging, or alternatively just are very good at just reading down a Word document. But I think that the danger of not modifying something is that you end up just basically going down, 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 down a Word document, and that makes it quite hard to get lost, especially because I think it's a lot easier to basically actually write everything down if you're fast enough at typing, which ends up just being like to reach a conclusion. So I think modifying it to be like specific boxes across a sheet that looks like this is actually what I probably prefer when I am tracking on a computer. I think it makes it a lot easier to visualize. Equally, just like manually doing the columns on a sheet like that, I think that again also makes it easier to visualize. The big advantage, I think, also of online era is that it also allows you to have it saved, which means that teams can ask you for feedback way after, which is something also that I would recommend. Tracking as a speaker. And here is where I think it's important to highlight that people are always like, oh, you know, speakers should track things that happen across the debate, and you should be able to, you know, reference things that happened before. I think that's kind of a lie, and people should, it's one of those like secret out loud things that happen in debate that I do think speakers should be tracking, and you should definitely be listening to what people are saying. I think it is unreasonable to expect speakers to follow everything in the same way that judges do, simply because of the fact that speakers don't have the ability to devote that kind of attention to detail and amount of time to typing that much. Given that they also have to be preoccupied with, you know, writing their own speech, communicating with their partner, giving POIs. So I don't think that it's reasonable as an expectation, but also don't think that it's reasonable just overall. So that's a lie. And given that, I think that the way that you track should be quite different. And I think that, in fact, attempting to over-track a debate whilst it's happening could potentially be damaging for you, because it means that you're neglecting the other bits that are, you know, the more important bits, because you don't actually stand up to give a summary of things the teams have said. You stand up to give responses and your own constructive material, which if you neglect them in favor of tracking, that's quite a bad thing. So then I think that the easiest way to actually keep track of what teams are saying, basically, is to just have a separate sheet in which you highlight specific things that they have said. So I normally would have, and I think this is the same for like a Word document. If you're just having like a shared Google Doc amongst teams, I think that's probably the most useful. But I think just having like a single sheet in which you write down sort of like opening up contributions, closing up contributions, if you're, you know, CG or something, and then write the main contributions rather than a full summary of the argument. And I think importantly, the bits that you need to respond to. So sometimes the argument will be quite incomplete, but if those are the bits that you need to respond to, then just write those down, I think. Alternatively, obviously, if they say something and you're not super sure if it's relevant or will become relevant or not, just type it down anyway, just for memory's sake. But I think that's the most useful thing, to just have like a shorthand record of things that teams have said. I'll go on to some like more tips in a little bit. I think that also having a Google Doc with your partner is actually quite beneficial, because then both of you can add to that tracking bit, and you can just have a quick look if you zoned out to write the extension to see like what are the main bits that I need to respond to. The only caveat with this is that I do think that then you need to have a clear chat, I guess, with your partner regarding how is it that they best understand written notes, because the format by which people write can be quite different. Do you follow bullet points or do you write full paragraphs? etc. So I think that communication is quite important to have before the debate in terms of arranging how you're actually going to type if you're having a shared sheet. There might be other reasons why people also prefer to not do that, but I'll go on to those later. Okay, so on to like the main meat of the workshop, which is, I think, the important, actually useful things, which are applicable things that you can do when you are judging or when you are speaking. So when you're judging, I think that there's overall sort of three main things that I would advise as useful when you judge. The first one is that it's very rare that you're going to actually have time, even with the fact that this is, you know, like a specifically formatted sheet, the fact that you're already working quite hard at summarizing rather than writing down word by word. You're just writing like a summary of the points that you're then going to be able to understand and follow and remember what happened in the round. It's still quite difficult to, in the 2 minutes when the judge goes, okay, hit me. Who do you think wins? Let's just have like a 2 minute like 2 minute think and then come up with rankings, to be able to actually go through everything. Or when you're being asked to consider two teams, and you know, it's also again quite difficult to actually read the full thing that you wrote in 30 seconds. So I think that then highlighting the points that you think are the most important is quite useful. You know, in the old days, I used to just like manually circle things. I still do that because I like writing. But I think that it's actually a lot easier to do when I judge using a Google Doc, or just Word, highlighting just what I think the most important arguments of each team are, or the most important responses. If someone gave like a phenomenal response that has turned around the debate, you probably want to highlight that at some point. I think that's quite useful in terms of sort of following what is happening. The second thing that I think is important is to also be able to have a substantive difference between rebuttal and also substantive material. In a lot of speeches, it's easy to do that because often people will just do responses at the top and then after that just do their own material, but it gets more complicated when people oftentimes will integrate responses into their own arguments when they fit in with their stuff. So I think that you also want to have some form of shorthand that allows you to quickly tell that something was a response. And I think writing response all the time is a little bit repetitive and also a little bit silly. So I think that there's a better way to do it. The way that I do it, both in Word documents and also on paper, is I just write an arrow down. So I know that if it has an arrow next to it, that means that overall, that means that it's a response essentially, and that it is responding to something. I think that is quite useful because then it helps, it's much easier to then help see how the speech interacts with other things in the room. And I usually just write down like CO arrow or something, like it's responding to that particular theme. But I think that's also quite important to highlight. The last thing that I think is useful to do when you're tracking, when you're judging, is, again, it all sort of comes down to how do you best take notes in a way that meaningfully allows you to follow what has happened through the debate and reference things if necessary, but also that allows you to quickly read through your notes in an effective fashion when you have 15 minutes to read notes that you took for an hour-long debate. And I think that this is actually the most important tip, and the one that I think is most useful and that most helped me, is that you need to be thinking about what each thing means throughout the debate, rather than just specifically at the end of the debate when you're gonna attempt to read through your notes, etc. So I think that you should already be kind of reading through your notes as the debate is happening. So for that, what I find most useful is to have, in addition to my notes, like a quick summary sheet somewhere else, or a quick summary table somewhere. I think that just having like literally just like a 4 square grid is best. And for that, I just do like quick like OG, OO, CG, CO, and then write a quick summary of these are the main points that they're saying. And then that means that then when the judge really quickly goes like, wing number 1, would you be able to summarize for everyone what the contributions from OG are? you already have that and you can like quickly go through it, and as well as utilizing your highlighted notes to add anything that you think is important and then write down. Equally, when you're trying to compare themes, you can have a quick look at your grid and just be like, okay, so this is what OG said, this is what CG said, which one do I think is better, more important? Okay, so far OG, read through your notes to just make sure that that's correct, and then be done with it. So I think it's a lot faster and more efficient, and also just the fact that you're having to think for yourself what the most important bits are and then summarize it into a little square already means that you're actively thinking about the debate and actively thinking about what teams are actually saying. So I think that that's probably the most useful comment, to have a quick summary thing that you can quickly reference and that you're actively adding to. The other important thing is that then, again, as I said, in terms of tracking, but this is more like towards the judging side, is to, you know, actively be thinking about which team wins, etc. But I'm sure someone else will talk to you about that at some point. The second thing that I also think is quite helpful is, or rather, the second thing in this particular set is quite helpful. And I don't do this, but I do know people who do. So I saw Brian do it, and I thought it was, oh, that's quite like a neat, nifty thing. But I think that this works much better if you're like quite used to quickly thinking about comparisons, and in that way it makes things speedier. The other thing that I think is quite helpful is to write down all the comparisons. So, and then just quickly write down your notes on that comparison. So for example, in top half, you'd write like OG over, OG, and then quick thoughts on that comparison. And then when CG is introduced, you can add like, okay, CGOO, and then quick thoughts on that comparison, and then like CGOG, and then quick thoughts on that comparison. And then same when like, then CO gets introduced. I think that the benefit of this is that it allows you to immediately think about comparisons. And then obviously you will have a very clear answer regarding who you think is winning. I don't think that this needs to be a huge paragraph. It just literally can be OG over OO, no response to OG's material, it all stands. Or weak response to the material by OG, or winning argument from OG was whatever. But I think that this is still quite helpful. I would recommend it for people who are able to sort of compartmentalize more, and also who have the capacity to quickly think about comparisons. Or alternatively, if you're trying to get better at thinking about comparisons, it's also a good challenge to set yourself. I personally don't use it just because I think that too much information sometimes overwhelms my mind in not positive ways, because I just get more distracted, because, you know, ADHD. But if it works for you, then that might be easier. And I think it can be quite helpful. And again, it's literally just like having it on a sheet, like highlighted names, and just add like a quick sentence underneath. So yeah, so I think those are the main things that I would say are helpful for judging. Onto the tips that I think are useful for speakers. And I think, again, the main thing that I will say for speakers is that anyone that's like, oh, I definitely flow everything that happens in the round is probably lying or like superhuman. Obviously, there are some speakers that probably manage to do this, but, you know, power to them. I don't think it's always the most realistic thing or the most realistic expectation to expect speakers to be able to keep up with those things. So I think that, or at least what I do normally is, you know, write down things on one sheet, and then gradually remove them from that sheet when I've already responded to it or added it to my own material. Or, well, I don't remove them, but I like turn them a different color, or like on paper cross them out when I'm typing on sheets. Just change them to like blue or something to know that I already dealt with it within my actual speech structure. And then once I've already like added it to the actual speech structure, I just continue to add like anything extra that they say to that bit of the argument, basically. The reason why I think this is kind of useful is because I think that having like a separate bit is helpful, rather than actively try to integrate it immediately into your notes, because again, you don't know what is going to become relevant. But also importantly, because sometimes you're like finishing up the typing of your extension, and then the speaker says something that like your partner or someone definitely needs to respond to, and you don't want to like, oh, really quickly, I need to like write that down and like think up of a response. You want to finish what you're doing and then like be like, okay, so now deal with it. So what I would normally do is to just have like the two sheets, like my speech and also like the team notes. And then on the team notes, you just go like, okay, really quickly, here's what they said, back to like continuing my speech. And then you can go back to that sheet and be like, okay, yeah, I need to deal with this. Grab it, integrate it into, I don't know, like it works really well as response because it's not relevant to my actual extension. So put it at the top, responses. So I think, again, having like a separate sheet where you just write down main contributions from each team, or like you're writing your extension and then the speaker says something and you're like, oh my God, that's like incredible, really quickly, scribble, go back to writing your extension, is helpful. And I think, again, changing, like once you've actually grabbed it and integrated it into your actual speech structure, then I think you can like turn out a different color and just continue to add, you know, new things that they said on there once you already know like where it is. But I do think having like a team thing basically is helpful to do. The main tip that I would say is just definitely have that sheet rather than actively attempt to flow everything that people say, just like really quick summary of things that are relevant that you need to respond to. And also I think that it's useful to actually have a visual way of telling whether or not you have dealt with it and added it, because otherwise you're just going to be like scanning the sheet endlessly being like, oh, have I responded to this? Have I responded to this? Have I actually responded to everything? I get less as a constructive extension speaker, for example, or as a PM or as an LO, but I actually think that as a extension, like as a whip, it can be quite stressful. So just be careful with that. The other thing that I was gonna quickly discuss is how this varies depending on where you are in the debate. I think that this sort of keeping a sheet throughout the whole debate and just adding things that people say that you think are very relevant, and this doesn't necessarily have to be like anyone from the other side. It can also be like, okay, here is the contribution from OO and we're CO. How do we need to like do some weighing at some point in the debate to explain how we take this over, or like given that like here are the three things that they said, here's our extension. So the main thing that I would say then is have that sheet and have it as a team, and be, I would say, more careful with flowing at the start, because you don't actually know what is going to become more relevant. So I think that more detail happens at the start, and once you already can kind of see where the debate is going and what is more important to respond to, you can start to be a bit more liberal with how much you write, and just use it as like shorthand reminders, not necessarily write everything down, but just write things that you think are like the most relevant. I usually, when I'm like judging, I wouldn't write like voting rights as the argument, because that's clearly not the argument that was presented. You write voting rights and then the full analysis underneath it. But if you're a speaker, then I think you think shorthand is a lot easier to just be like voting rights, I need to respond to that, whatever, move on. So yeah, I think that obviously tracking differs quite a bit depending on where you are on the debate. I think if you're LO, you have basically the easiest job, because you can just like write your own speech down and then just flow the PM normally and just respond to it basically. So yeah, top half, great times. I think that flowing on tracking gets a little bit more complicated after. Obviously, you know, some people are weird and really enjoy keeping track of debates manually when they're in top half and they're listening to bottom half, if you find that useful. And I think some people do, because you can, you know, look back on rounds and can be helpful. Go you. I think obviously though the relevance of that to you and your position and securing the win in the debate is less, when I think you can also just like listen and then write down a POI that is relevant. But some people find it very helpful, so obviously up to you. But I think it gets a little bit more complicated when you're having to juggle like listening to the path, writing your own speech, also adding rebuttal and comparisons and weighing. So yeah, so I think just like keep the same sheet. I think it's also important to have it as like a team thing, because particularly, I don't know, DLO obviously needs to deal with a lot more stuff that they need to respond to. So once LO has spoken, then they basically have more freedom to sort of listen to what's happening. Same with like extension and whips. So yeah, just make sure that you actually do have that sheet, that you don't stress out about trying to type everything down, and that you have some way of telling apart like when you've already included it in something. Also, again, it's very much what is relevant. So I think there's many times that I just have like heard a particular phrase and wanted to highlight it in a speech and be like, you can even tell from the language that they're using that blah, 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 and use it as an example. And it's not like super relevant to the debate, or not super relevant in the sense that it's not an argument that they made. It's not the flagship of their arguments, but it's something that you still consider important and relevant to you winning, so you can still add it. So yeah, just keep that sheet, add what you have some way of distinguishing when you've already added it to your own notes and when you've not, and have it as a team thing. And I think that then that's a most useful thing. Yeah, so that's what I would recommend in terms of for tracking. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take questions on Messenger, I guess, to just PM me on Facebook. And yeah, best of luck at Worlds, everyone. If you're watching a tracking workshop on the morning of Worlds, you know, you're already killing it and an overachiever, and that's fine. Hope you all do amazing. Yeah, best of luck and enjoy the day, you all.